Gay rights, they exist in your government?
I would say anti-discrimination laws in general would pretty much exist.
How would that be? What if 51% of the people said no? Eventually, can I ask you, like, this will seem not related, but I think we can see how this will get us to where we are. Forget about switching to a global system. How would you identify yourself politically as like a citizen of the United States? Like, are you a socialist? Are you like just sort of a central Democrat? Are you Republican? Like, what's sort of your political philosophy?
I am what you would refer to as a market socialist.
A market. So, do you think that ideology would win out in a global government?
To a degree, I think we would end up, for the most part, some form of social democracy. Considering the vast majority of the developed world are social democracies.
Are there more people in the developed world or the undeveloped world? In other words, the first world, we would say, right? Are there more people in the first world than there are outside? I actually don't know. I'm asking you.
So when we talk about the developed world, we're talking mostly about Europe, Asia, or parts of Asia, parts of South America,
Well,
and then obviously America. So I would say, yeah, there's more population in the developed world than there is the undeveloped world.
I don't think that's first off, I think you have a category error there. I don't think if you're going to say that most of the world is sort of social democracies or the developed world socialism, I don't think you could add India and China there. Right? You can't add those Asian countries. They're not what we would consider social democracies. You would acknowledge that, right?
China definitely not. China is a it's in the state capitalism phase of communism. But India has social democratic elements. Fuck, even Israel has social democratic elements to it. The majority of even remotely developed nations have certain social democratic elements to it, like universal health care, free college, etc.
So, according to what I'm looking at, like through UN definitions, roughly the global population is about 8.2 billion, right? Now they define sort of first world countries, or the way they type it is like you developed countries. They define that as follows: high income, highly developed economies. Examples of these would include the United States, Japan, Germany, UK, Canada, Australia. Now, this wouldn't include places like India. That wouldn't include places like China, right? Do you want to take a guess on what the population of the first world or developed countries are? It's 1.3 billion. That means the rest of the world is 6.9 billion. That leaves us with a total of 16% of the developed world.
Well,
that's the population, 16%.
Me and them are using a slightly different definition.
Okay, that's fair.
When I'm talking about developed countries, I'm mostly talking about industrialized countries. So India and China would count in my definition.
But even if we, so I don't think that you could make the claim that China is like a market socialist country. It's just not. You would agree with that?
No, I mean even China has social democratic elements to it, but it is by nature a communist country that is in the state capitalism phase.
Okay,
which state capitalism, to be clear, is effectively a authoritarian version of social democracy.
Okay, well, let's try a different tack. Then I guess the parts that would matter would be like social policy and social democracies. Let's start there, because presumably the economic policy would be sort of changed dramatically anyways, because it's a one world government. So let's forget about economic policy for a second in the one world government. Let's talk about the social policy. Gay rights, they exist in your government?
I would say anti-discrimination laws in general would pretty much exist.
How would that be? What if 51% of the people said no?
I mean, that would be something that we would have to bake into the Constitution.
Okay, then who gets to decide the Constitution?
Just like we do here in the United States. It would have to be something that each country votes on in order for us to establish the government. Or the way that I realistically think that a one world government would have to happen is it would have to start with the United States, Canada, like basically North America, and then Europe, and then branch out to certain areas of Asia and then bring in and also certain areas of South America and then bring in the non-industrialized world after that. That's the only way that it's going to work, especially because there is the cohesion issue that you mentioned, where we would have to combat the issues of like the Middle East. Like the Middle East is like the biggest problem with developing a global government is literally going to be the Middle East, because not necessarily the people there, because a lot of the people there actually do want like women's rights and things like that. We see that with the protests in Iran, where they had that massive fucking protest over the one chick being killed. I don't remember her name, unfortunately. But the governments in particular and the radical Muslim groups would be the issue.
I promise we'll get to women's rights in a second. And I see what you're saying, and I promise I'll address it. But I want to get one more ground fact before we get there. Let's just take gay rights for a second. Presumably something you're for, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that more than 51% of the population of the world supports gay rights?
I would say it's probably close to 50%.
No, I don't think it's that close. I think a lot of other countries around the world play. I don't think, even if you could make the argument that like, well, I think the average person in China is not too happy with their system. Culturally, they're far afield of sort of what we would accept in what you would probably like as progressivism when it comes to LGBT issues.
No, China's actually a bad example there, because China actually very recently, and so did Cuba, established gay rights and trans rights as part of their laws. Actually, Cuba in particular actually established it as part of their constitution.
Now, I think my gut feeling tells me it's going to be very difficult to find sort of studies on this. I think it's going to be very difficult because I don't know exactly how you would be able to do this. But my guess is that most of the world would be far more hardline on gay rights, LGBT rights, particularly as they might be like, sure, we're not stoning gay people. And maybe they would even be for some form of like gay marriage. But when it comes to a lot of the rights that we see for sort of LGBT rights that gets more into closer what you probably would accept as wanting maybe more trans issues and things like that, they're not going to accept that. You at least agree with that, right?
I'm just going to be blunt on this one, and a lot of leftists will not like me for this. The biggest issue is going to be the Muslim countries.
Okay.
Whenever it comes to that.
But nonetheless, I think even aside from I guess we'll just make it undeniable so that a place that everyone will accept that I think that where there's some sense of agreement. Are you for trans rights, like as we see them in the United States as they're pushed? Like,
yes, for the most part.
Would you say it would be a human rights abuse to say something like trans women, so a male transitioning to female, should not be allowed to use a restroom designed for biological females?
That issue is actually, for the most part, uniquely an American issue. The most European countries don't have gendered bathrooms.
Well, but they would have spaces specifically, whether it be bathrooms or not, specifically for biological males and females. You would agree with that?
Well, they use unisex bathrooms.
Okay, but even if not bathroom, they would have certain spaces, certain organizations, areas that would traditionally.
If you're talking like locker rooms, stuff like that. Yeah, right. There would be that issue.
I know this seems like a fringe issue, but I'll get to why it's important in a second. Do you feel that would be against the rights of trans people to tell a biological male that transitioned to female that they couldn't go in those female spaces?
I do, as long as they're actually transitioned.
Sure, it's not someone faking; it's someone that's actually trying through the process of, taking the proper medical procedures. Etc. Okay, fine. You do realize there's 0% chance that shit flies in a global world. There's just no way that more than 50% of the people buy that. I mean, there's probably it's probably an 80-20 issue against that in the United States, let alone if you get to places like China. Right?
I don't think it's an 80-20 issue in the United States. But you're right that in like at least in the bathrooms aspect of it and maybe the locker rooms aspect of it, there's at least right now there's more of a favor towards
Okay, so you're
not
fine
allowing
with
it.
that, with the global government saying, yep, that trans stuff's bullshit. You'd be fine with that?
I would be okay with just doing anti-discrimination laws like what we see in the United States, where it is you can't discriminate people in like housing, job opportunities, things like that.
Okay. Well, first off, you are wearing, like, oftentimes it's Democrats that are actually trying to revoke that. For example, there's a proposition that was passed years ago in California that said that you're not allowed to have preferential or discriminatory treatment when it comes to hiring practices based on race, gender, etc. And Democrats want that overturned because they realize that screws up affirmative action. So just to be clear, it's not about the globalism debate, but you're against that, right? You'd say affirmative action's shit.
I'm actually not necessarily for affirmative
Okay.
action. I am the more economic focused type of socialist. I think social issues, for the most part, are a secondary issue that are would mostly be solved by focusing on economic issues.
I don't think so. And let me tell you why. So I think I'm making the point that I'm trying to make with the trans issues, with the LGBT issues, even with women's rights and other things. I don't think it's as clear cut as you think that the rest of the world will just say, yes, even though currently the countries we live in are far afield from what progressives like in the United States and the Western world will happily accept it, even though they're only about 19% of the global population. I think that there's two possibilities. If you make this as democratic as possible, then this globalist system's actually going to come much closer to my social wants than yours. And then I don't know how you accept that. And it seems that you try to get out of that by saying, well, it's because we'll enshrine it into some sort of global constitution. But that would be anti democratic. And then the question is, how will you coerce people to accept it? Through point of a gun? It'll be illegal for them not to accept something that the vast majority of them don't want?
So, like I said, the main issue that I see when it comes to the cohesion part of things is the Islamic countries. And I'm going to be blunt. Whenever it comes to the Islamic countries, especially the Islamic governments, yeah, for the most part, I think we would have to take care of the current system of Islamic governments at the point of a gun, especially when it comes to Iran, when it comes to Afghanistan, when it comes to Saudi Arabia. I actually like somewhat off topic, but like the fact that Saudi Arabia keeps buying into things uh, in America, like they just bought EA, they've bought into fucking the WWE and a bunch of shit, pisses me the fuck off because of what Saudi Arabia is.
Okay, but first off, I think you mistake that it would just be like the entire world accepts Western values except the Middle East. I don't think that's true at all. I think that the more populous countries like India and China would say, no, we do not accept the culture. We find a lot of the cultural values of the United States and the Western world to be degenerate. We think that we're not going to accept that. So I think that you mistake that. But even if we accept, and I don't, but if for the sake of argument, if we would say, fine, everyone will be on board, 80% of the world's on board, now it's just the Islamic countries, like, you do realize that if you force this upon them, like, for example, if you go into these countries, if you go into Iran and you say, like, nope, hijabs, you can't enforce that anymore, you're going to see an uptick of terror attacks. You would agree with that?
We would have to deal with the radical Islamic element in order for it to work. Yes.
And what do you do when you have, like, caliphates like in Iran that have potentially have nuclear weapons? Then what? Or that are close to getting nuclear weapons, or certainly, let me rephrase that. They don't have nuclear weapons. They have weapons of mass destruction. They have chemical, biological agents. This could literally, in my estimation, this would lead to horrific amounts of death to force this upon them in an immediacy, like you're suggesting via globalism.
Uh, like I said, I would want to integrate the Islamic countries in last for that specific reason.
Give me a time frame.
Uh, in order to set it up, so I would integrate the United States and Europe first, because we are the most socially compatible whenever it comes to uh, politics. Then I would probably go with like certain developed countries in South America and like South Africa, and then move into like India and China.